Russia's strategy seems to make less and less sense every time we look at the map. What exactly are they doing? What is their larger plan? And how can Ukraine counter it? I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. It is January 27th, 2023. This is your daily Ukraine update. Let's get into it. Okay, when we look at the control map, this is what I'm talking about. So the control map has some of the most updates. There's two areas where Russian forces have advanced. One is Klachivka, and this is something we talked about yesterday. In fact, it said yesterday that Russia would have to use this wooded area and this road here as really the only covered and concealed position from which they can advance, right, towards Chasiv Yar and Ivansky. Obviously, passing through this big open ground would turn their troops into an absolute cannon fodder. And so that's exactly what they've done. They've tried to continue to advance up this road here and use this terrain, the wooded areas here, as at least some cover in order to push towards Chasiv Yar. Here's the problem, and we've still talked about this. Russia hasn't solved the fundamental issue of the fact that there's a sort of tripartite defense here. Chasiv Yar itself is a wooded and urban area, and we're going to look at the more detailed combat map to show exactly what this entails. You have Ivansky, another developed area, and you have Bakhmut, all of which are really, really tough. And I know they aspire to encircle Bakhmut, but you can see here, it's really going to be quite tough to create something that can effectively encircle it, right? This is going to involve stringing out their forces, creating a huge vulnerable salient. Again, it's not clear that Ukrainian forces are counterattacking, probably just for the same reason Russian forces have been ordered to conserve their ammunition, i.e. to prepare for an offensive in the spring. But I suspect that they acknowledge that this is probably a hard line, this control of this roadway here, since it's essential to sustaining the defensive effort in Bakhmut at large. They almost certainly have a plan B of this roadway here, feeding into Bakhmut. Let's see if we can get some names. We'll do it on the other map. But again, so the question is ultimately, if Russia doesn't think, Russia sees the same map we do, and it's not clear that this encirclement is going to work to close Bakhmut, then you ask yourself, why? Why are they continuing to push? I mean, on one hand, it's about exploiting the advantages that you have. But again, these aren't the sort of lightning gains that we were expecting. They're, a kilometer or so a day, not really that much territory, and of minimal value. You can see Klachivka. These are open fields and wood lines. Why is Russia making this advance? And here's where things get even weirder. The other place where they've made gains is out here near Bilohorivka. And you could see it's a comparatively minor gains. Looks like it's about, back it up. How do we end up out here? All right, there we go. It's like maybe 500 meters. But what's strange is, again, you're left with this question of why. Why is Russia pushing in this area? I understand they probably want to shore up this vulnerable salient at this 90-degree angle they've created here north of Soledar, but it looks more like what Russia's doing is just pushing broadly across the front lines. And here, we'll take a look at the combat map where this becomes more apparent, right? So we've said, obviously, some level of advances here in Bilohorivka. You also, of course, have Russian forces advancing in Klachivka. You can see here this, and you may notice you're like, wow, this looks considerably different than the front line in Klachivka, and on the other map. And the reason is because I think this territory is just so low value that no one's fighting over it, right? There are no Ukrainian defensive positions here, would be my guess. And I suspect that there's very little Russians are here as well. They're probably trying to spend the absolute minimum amount of time in these big open areas. And Ukrainian forces probably, I suspect, are fighting a gradual retreat, again, probably until they can preserve this H32 line where they can use wood lines, this urbanized area, and the areas of southwest Bakhmut, all to form a sort of coherent defensive line that's going to preserve the ability to use H32 and still hold Russian troops at bay. Again, I really think that Ukrainian forces, while they have been reluctant to really, really dig in and hold the defensive line lately, again, probably in preparation for an offensive, I think they're going to do it here simply because it's too lucrative. It's too juicy to force the Russians to take Bakhmut block by block. The punishing nature of it will just be too it'll be too easy for Ukraine to really, really make Russians pay a price for Bakhmut. So they probably don't want it to be encircled. It's also just so unbelievably hard for Russia to encircle Bakhmut. You guys can, again, see on the map. But you can see here, they're still attacking in eastern Bakhmut. They're still attacking in Klachivka. They're still attacking in Krasnohora, right? And we know that they've attacked in Bilohorivka, in addition to attacking near other Bilohorivka up here, as well as still launching 3 attacks a day in the exact same places at the exact same schedule outside of Donetsk, and still launching these assaults in Volodar, which, by the way, I want to point out that recent viral footage has shown that Volodar has taken quite a beating. I can't show it here because YouTube's terms of service have cracked down pretty good on even things like destroyed buildings and stuff. But if you want to check out that and all of this week's viral combat videos, I do that on the Patreon. I also put any video that I think is YouTube compliant. I upload it and YouTube is like, hey, this actually can't be monetized. I put all those on the Patreon as well. So again, if you want me to break down those viral combat videos, you know the ones I'm talking about, like the bunker video. I do all those on the Patreon. So check the link in the description. But we'll take a look at that video and see exactly how much of a beating the town of Volodar has taken. And it's just fascinating to me and a testament to the factionalization of Russian forces that you can have all of these offensive efforts taking place with no real sign of strategic work at all. And it's interesting to me that we see Russia doing it and we see Ukraine instead largely engaging in a defensive effort. They're sort of counterattacking, but they are, they're stalling. They're trading space for time. And I think this is a function of the fact that Ukraine has realized that for them, what's called economy of force is one of their most important assets, simply because Russia has seemingly unlimited numbers of men and a lot of material, but certainly not infinite. And when Ukraine succeeds, it succeeds in events like this, like the Kharkiv offensive, where they break Russian lines, create total chaos in the backfield, move faster than Russia's antiquated command and control system can adequately respond to, and then take huge amounts of territory, being constrained only by their own logistics and support system. So I think, you also, of course, have events like Kherson, where it probably would have been a similar outcome, though before Ukrainian forces could really push, step on the gas, so to speak, Russian forces realized just how dangerously ill-equipped their forces had become due to Ukrainian preparatory fires, namely interdicting Russian supplies crossing over the Dnipro, that they withdrew themselves, which, of course, was probably a faster operation than the than the Ukrainians and launching an actual offensive would have been. So I think Ukraine has understood that they are going to thrive and have the best chance of really regaining significant territory by launching these decisive lightning offensives and spending the remaining time conserving their forces and forcing the Russians to expend men and material in order to launch offensive operations. But again, ultimately, it's just hard to tell. The answer is Russia isn't thinking. Russia in this conflict is the Wagner Group. It's the DNR, LNR. It's the Kadriovitsky Chechens, and it's the Russian Ministry of Defense, all fighting for separate conflicts broadly at the same time. And it's actually really interesting. Institute for the Study of War talks about just how sort of insane the infighting has gotten. This is an altercation between Yevgeny Prigozhin and Igor Girkin. To be clear, Igor Girkin is a mill blogger. Like he's like me or Arthur Ray, and Yevgeny Prigozhin is like, there's not an analogy in the West, but we could think of them as like a deputy minister of defense or like a chairman of the Joint Chiefs or like chief of staff of the army, maybe. In terms of authority, I understand there's no analogy for something like the Wagner Group. And people are going to go, oh, it's like Blackwater. Blackwater never fielded 50,000 troops, and that's what he's got in the field. So when you have that many troops, you're like a 2 or 3 star general. The idea that you have a like 3-star general basically beefing, or a Secretary of Defense level position, beefing with a blogger and talking all of this smack on he misconstrued my criticism of him as an attack on Wagner, and Girkin criticized Prigozhin of committing Wagner forces, and Prigozhin says, I made a promise to several presidents that I'll defend them. And this makes Elon Musk on Twitter look like President Obama. Like just this is like an unbelievably stupid beef. Again, if you're a mill blogger, I get it. No such thing as bad press. But like Prigozhin has a war to fight, my guy. Like you don't need to be beefing on Twitter with these yahoos. And like Girkin's like, oh my God, like. Girkin was like, yeah, I'd fight with one of your assault units if you sent me a serious invitation. Prigozhin said that Wagner doesn't send out invitations. That's true. They come to your prison and explain to you what's happening to you. And stated Girkin would not be effective on the front lines because he's only interested in promoting himself for financial benefit. Yo, this is what they're doing instead of managing this war. This is why there's no overarching strategy. Instead of coordination and collaboration at the highest levels, you have infighting and bickering. And don't get me wrong, every military has infighting and bickering, but this is at a scale, and the fact that it's out in public means that usually you rely on someone like Putin at the highest level of the Kremlin to take these individuals and force them to at least have their fights inside the war room. But he can't do that, right? Putin's too sick or ill or ineffective or busy or some combination of the three to stop this sort of absolutely preposterous infighting. Anyway, guys, that's all I had for you for today. Do check out the Patreon. New video drops today. All of this week's Viral Combat videos, and I will catch you guys in the next one.